Discovery, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Oh, am I doing the intro? Hey, welcome to Health or High. That's why I thought you were looking at me. Welcome to Health or High Water. Obviously, we're off to a fantastic start. Brett here with Bethany also. Bethany, what's up?
No, nothing.
And Mr. Tripp, and
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
And there we go. Our levels are much better. And of course, Diane. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. This is going to be a blast. I can tell. You guys are awesome.
This is how we always start podcasts. Yeah, thanks again for taking time out of your day. I know you have 100 things to do, I'm sure. So it means a lot to us for you to join us. Tripp's going to give you a great introduction, and then we'll get into a conversation today. So
I'm sorry, man. My bad. Hey, guys, we're super happy to have Diane on here. She's the founder of COPE Center of Oncology, Psychology Excellence. She's also works for, was it a patent advisor? Patient advisor?
Oh, yeah.
Patient advisor, Blue Note Therapeutics for mental care for cancer patients. She's an award-winning author with 2 books, Healing Forward, Unlikely Gift of Breast Cancer. She's also a podcast host, motivational speaker, blogger, mentor, and you own your own company, too, as well.
Yeah, I guess technically that's correct.
You do all the things.
Yeah, why not?
the only way to do it today is to own your own company.
It is.
It really is.
And that allows you the freedom and the flexibility. I love that. I do.
Yeah.
Just you can go off in any direction.
Yeah, and you get to pick, and you get to find stuff you're passionate about too, and you feel meaningful because days get tough, so you get exhausted and tired, and to have something you feel like, oh, okay, this is the reason I'm getting out of bed this morning.
Exactly. And as I mentioned, for me, it's all about impact. Excuse me. And for the longest time, you just get out of bed, you go to work, you sit there in front of a computer and act like you're working for years. And it just didn't feed my soul. And so that's always, what can I do today to have impact, to help, to lift somebody else up? And so, so many things that I've done in areas where I've worked in, and things that I've seen done well and not so well. And so I just, like I said, I want to do and give back in ways that are impactful and will help move the needle for someone else. That's what life is all about.
Yeah, this is exciting. As we've started, Health or High Water podcast, we've had the opportunity to have a lot of different people on here. And kind of what I think the overriding theme we found is we're starting to see everyone's mission come together. We're seeing this big change, and as we were getting ready to have you on, and we were excited to talk about that. You had a unique story, and you're doing some unique things. Would you mind kind of going into, for the listeners, a little bit about, you did have breast cancer. We talked about that there was how traumatic it is physically and emotionally. Could you tell a little bit about, as much as you'd like to, about the background behind how that happened?
Sure.
What are the things you got through it, and then kind of where that propels you to in your own fashion?
Thank you. Absolutely happy to. Breast cancer is typically not a pleasant topic to talk about, but and I went through it. I'm a 9-year survivor now, thankfully, but it changed my life. It was one of those major points in my life when everything changed. So leading up to that, and I was 49 and a half when I was diagnosed, and I had it in my head that finally when I turned 50, life was going to make sense, and I was going to be skinny enough, and my hair was going to be long enough, and I was just so hard on myself for so long because I'd done well professionally. I was in at the time kind of an insane job. I called it adult daycare jokingly because it just didn't feed my soul. And so
what was it? Adult daycare? What was the? It
was an aerospace company. We were developing electric airplanes, and really cool. But it just a lot of, you need a lot of other people's money to do this. And a great idea is, and a need, I should say, it makes sense on paper. But as far as developing these technologies, it's so complicated and it requires so much. And then again, when you're asking so much of others, then they have their own way that they think it should be done. And it's just, anyway, so I just was finding myself not being heard and trying to keep everybody from killing each other, basically. And so anyway, so that's where I was at mentally. And happily married finally. At the time I was diagnosed, I had 11 years before I got my cancer diagnosis. I had a tumor identified in my left breast that ended up not being cancerous. So I had annual mammograms, faithfully, wrongly thinking that, if I have my mammogram, I'm not going to get cancer. It's just a silliness idea you get in your head. So I had done that. And so what happened is that since I and so many others, including men, have dense breast tissue, they couldn't see on those annual mammograms these tumors forming. And so it took 2 of those little buggers to get finally close enough together, but they were still so small that it finally, they were able to see on pathology, like, this doesn't look right. It's clustering is the word that they used. And so they called me back, and then they were able to discover that, holy crap, it has now already spread to her lymph nodes. And Diane, and this became a recurring theme, is I always joke that I'm abnormal because most normal people, the way that this happens is that your initial tumor site, the tumors get much larger before it spreads. Mine was not doing that. My largest of those 2 tumors that were close together was a little less than 2 centimeters.
Didn't you say there was 7 or 8 different types specifically? Do you mind saying what type you had?
Oh gosh, you're gonna ask. I'll say the
acronym.
Yes, I know. So the type of breast cancer I had was fed by estrogen positive. But it was not the dreaded triple negative. I was HER2 negative. And so it's the type of breast cancer, if you're a woman and you're going to get breast cancer, 80% of women that get this type of breast cancer get this type of breast cancer. So there's a lot of data and knowledge because there's so much of it. And I was obsessed with, like so many are, well, why did this happen to me? What did I do? And I was like, reliving my life, like, okay, what did I do wrong, God? What? And just assuming that because I look at life so logically, and so much to this had no logic. It didn't make logical sense. And so that was part of the mystery, if you will, as I started to speed read a million books, trying to find answers. And there's a lot of great books out there. The ones that I picked turned out to be very superficial. And do this, don't do that. And what I found for myself is that this is such an individual experience for any type of cancer or any type of health condition, if you will. It just depends on how healthy you've been before that, how you react to all these drugs and poisons they put in your system, the traumas that you've had, quite honestly, both physically and mentally. And so to put us all in a box and say, okay, you have this should happen, this, and those kinds of normal things were not happening to me. I was experiencing this in my own bizarre way, and that became a theme.
Yeah, when you said that you were like asking God why, did you mean because you had taken, like, hey, I've been taking good care of myself, or like there's nothing, is that sort of the...
That was part of it.
Like, hey, why did this happen? There's none in my family, as you mentioned before.
Yeah, yeah. And to me, I'd always just believed there's just consequence. You do everything right, you shouldn't have to deal with this. And this was... So finally, that was one of the turning points, was I said, what if I view this as maybe this is a test. Maybe this is an actual opportunity to see how really tough I think I am, and to do something positive and to turn this experience on its ear. And I made that realization very early, and I started to slide into depression once. And so I had chemo, radiation, and surgery. I didn't have a full mastectomy. It was an option, but it wasn't going to help me. Again, this makes no sense, but my tumors were so small that if they removed the entire breast, it was going to have a zero effect on the chances of this type of breast cancer recurring. And so they said we could just go take the tumors and the tissue around it, which is what I did, because the reconstructive surgery for me was going to be brutal, and meaning a lot of them, and it was going to take another year on top of what I had already been through.
What was it like getting that diagnosis, coming back? What was the support like? Is it the doctor coming in and saying, or how did that feel? How did that work? What was that initial diagnosis?
So I suspected. So what happened with me is that I went in for my annual routine mammogram, got called back in because they needed some more quote unquote information. And so I had a diagnostic mammogram, which is kind of a more intense mammogram. And then they did the ultrasound. And so it was the ultrasound technician who happened to have served in the Air Force like my husband did. We just started chatting, For some reason, people just kind of open up to me, which is great. But I made some stupid comment because she had that it's the wand, with the wand. And so she put that wand in my armpit. And I'm like, uh-oh, that's not good. So I asked her a dumb question. I said, how can you see? Because the screen looks like snow on the screen. I go, how in the world can you see anything on there? It just looks like snow. And she goes, well, I'm not supposed to say anything, but it doesn't look good. And that was the first inkling I had. I was just clueless. I'm just asking my dumb, dopey questions.
Yeah.
And so then I already suspected that day I was going to get a cancer diagnosis.
Whoa.
And so when she said that, then she goes, I have to go get the radiologist. And I'm like, oh, I'm really screwed now.
Oh my gosh.
He came in, he looked at the monitor, he goes, yeah, I don't need to do anything. You need to come in for a biopsy.
Oh.
And I just, bang, bang, bang. And so I just knew. And so then as I left that day, and it's actually in my first book, which is really the whole story of this year, my experience with this, everybody's holding the door open for me. And I was thinking in my head, there goes our next breast cancer victim. And so I had biopsies, I think, a couple days later, and I got the call the day after that from my primary care doctor's nurse. And then, as you see it portrayed in the movies, is what happened to me. You feel like you're falling backwards. Like you can't, all of a sudden, I can't, like my ears were filling up with cotton balls and everything's muffled. And she's like, are you okay? And I don't remember anything after she said, your cancer, you have cancer.
They told you over the phone?
Yeah, they did. And so there's no still really, what's the right way to do this? But in the case of me, because it had already traveled, the cancer had already traveled to my left armpit. And so it was in my lymph nodes. They were concerned it was going to unleash throughout my whole body. In fact, they didn't know yet if it already had. And so they're like, you have got to get moving on this. And so I had like all these tests scheduled. And it took 3 weeks from the day I got the cancer diagnosis, the call from my doctor's office, for the determination to be made, because of all these tests, for the determination to be made that the cancer had not metastasized throughout the rest of my body. 3 weeks. And that's actually not a lot of time compared to people that live in rural areas, and you're going back maybe once every month to get...
Right.
Anyway, so it's terrifying. It's terrorizing to go through this much trauma. And that was really the segue into my interest and my care and compassion for how traumatizing this is, and that the way that our healthcare system has been traditionally set up, we're not really addressing that to the degree that I think we should be.
Yeah, what should, now looking back on that, obviously we'll get into your book, Heal Forward. Is that the only book you've written?
No, I have. This is the first one about the unlikely gift of breast cancer. And then the Heal Forward book just has a great cover. Everybody likes the cover, and that's about all they have to say
Is
about
that,
it.
oh, I was meaning to ask you, is that your calf?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You see this calf?
So just an aside, I've entered the book in cover design contest because it's inspirational, and I liked writing it. But
That's good.
my whole thing with writing is really more about what the unlikely gift of breast cancer, which is like raw, and the funny parts, the frightening parts. It's just and this was the Heal Forward book was my first foray into like an inspirational book, and it's stories of people who have overcome their own traumatic experiences by channeling into impact projects.
Yeah.
Which is cool. But everybody goes back. They're like, no, tell your stories, because you have us laughing one page, you turn the page, and then you're crying. Yeah. That's just my writing style. So anyway, we joke that the Heal Forward book is, it's got a great cover.
A side question that I wanted to ask you about writing the book, and now 2 books. Well, just briefly, because I know this is a little tangent, but writing it, was it tough to write it? Did you find like you sat down? How long did it take you from start to finish? Yeah. Just curious a little bit about the process of writing it.
Sure.
Was it harder than you thought? Did you enjoy it? What was it?
So I was trained as a print journalust. And so that goes way back to college. And get this, I knew at the time I didn't want to be a newspaper reporter. Just not a lot of options for colleges in Nebraska where I grew up. Well, I wanted a public relations degree because you can do so much with that. But where I chose to go to school offered a PR degree through their journalism department. So that's why I got trained a newspaper reporter, and that's very formal writing.
Yeah.
And it was a good foundation, but I ended up doing a lot of business writing. And I always said, giving other people the words and propping everybody else up and making them look good. But I had, through my cancer experience, I had 3 or 4 moments where I had already started journaling because I'm not a complainer, and I knew better. I didn't want to just complain to people because I wasn't even on social media yet in 2015. Yeah. So I just sent these long emails out to our closest friends, and they were so appreciative. But I had a couple moments where I just had these like thoughts and like, you should turn your journal into a book. And so that's what I did. It's what I set out to do. But because I'd been trained to report a story and not tell a story, I hired an expensive writing coach. She taught me how to really tell a story and the importance of putting emotion into it. And that was very helpful. And so because I hired her for 6 months and I was paying her so much, I wanted to get my money's worth. So that's how I got the book written so fast. The first draft of the manuscript, at least, because I was writing a chapter a week before I would go to work, and I was working a full-time job too.
Yeah,
so,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm really glad I asked that. And like, because you want to write, you want it to be personable and easy to read, right?
Yes.
That's fun for people to digest it. But you also want to include information that's like, sometimes it gets a little esoteric, where it's like, is this too much for the average listener? Yeah. So that balance can be very difficult.
And I know there's some people that they're like, okay, you're my favorite author. I will read anything that you write. So I do a monthly quick blog just to keep my writing chops up. There's women especially who have been through cancer themselves that read it, and they're like, I couldn't finish it. It was too raw. It was too, it was too hard for me. And because you're absolutely right. Funny stuff happened. I mean, bizarre stuff happened. Heart-wrenching stuff happened. And I just don't hold back. I really wanted to hone in on that emotion. And it was just too much for some people. And I get into a lot of other life experiences that impacted, like I had a bad experience with organized religion. So now I don't go to church because it was all about money. And a horrible thing, I tell the story in the book, but that really impacted and still impacts how I process, how I respond to traumatic experiences like this. And those life experiences and how it impacts how you react to this experience, which just goes on and on and on. You're sick all the time. I was afraid I was never going to feel good again. How all of that kind of not prepares you, but kind of cues you up for one of what I think will likely be one of the ultimate tests of my whole entire life, was to go through what was considered a treatable cancer, but just barely, because when they started biopsying those lymph nodes in my left armpit, they biopsied only one because they were fearful it was they were gonna unleash the cancer throughout the rest of my body. And I'm like, I didn't know that could happen. And they're like, yeah, we need to stop now. You have, and they staged me, which is how they determine how they're going to treat you, because it's traveled to your lymph nodes and you're so abnormal because your tumors are so small, but it's behaving aggressively. We're going to give you the full on, like, as much of everything as you can handle without killing you. And that's what they did.
Holy crap.
Yep, that's what they did. And had a second opinion, and they agreed with that. They're like, yeah, everything that you can take without, we're just going to take you to the edge of death.
Oh my God.
And so what damage have I done? I have no idea. Some of this stuff, even the chemo drugs were bad enough, but it was the radiation, because I ended up having 3 breast tumors, those 2 that were close together, but I had a third one on my chest wall. That's right next to your heart. And they have to radiate that little sucker. And so I would have to hold my breath when they do the radiation. And it just I didn't really think about it until my skin started to burn, and it burned in weird places. I'm like, I thought you were just radiating the tumor site where the tumors were, because I'd already had the tumors out by then in lumpectomy surgery. And they're like, oh no, we radiate this whole quadrant of your body.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting burned. There's lymph nodes right here at the base of your neck. Those got fried, and so they no longer work. And so after radiation and your formal treatment plan has ended, and you've survived that, thank God. And then lymphedema kicks in, and that is where your lymphatic system, which acts kind of like a drain, filter's supposed to filter out all the bad cells, including cancer cells. it's now had some of those lymph nodes removed because they contained cancer. And by the way, that bundle of lymph nodes in my left armpit, every one of them had cancer at some point. The chemo shrunk the tumors,
Yeah.
so the whole bundle had to go. And but I mean, I only had 6 lymph nodes taken out. Some people have like 30 or 50. It's unbelievable.
Wait, how many lymph nodes do we have?
Hundreds, I think.
Do we really?
I think.
I think it's like 65
That's a-
or something.
Oh, really? Okay, so don't ask. Don't
Oh,
listen
no,
to me. I have no
Let's double
idea.
check.
Trip goes, wait, let's double check. So along that path, have you noticed anything missing that you felt like should have been done differently from the medical side? Did you feel like it was all great? Like, give me what your thoughts on.
Yeah, thank you. No, incredible knowledge and data that exists about. We've come so far, and because I'm such a nut about data and history, there was a great book written, and it won the Pulitzer Prize in 2011, called "The Emperor of All Maladies: Cancer, the Emperor of All Maladies," and it was written by a medical oncologist. I'll butcher his name, so I won't even try it. But I needed to understand how in the heck did we learn about cancer and how it's evolved. And so he did this incredible history of his best research and what he found. And kind of fast forward to radiation came first in the 1800s. And they back in the late 1800s, for women who had breast cancer, they would do what they called these radical mastectomies, where they would, sorry to get so graphic and gross, I'll try to
Do it.
contain myself, but all the breast tissue in the breast, and then they would remove muscle. I mean, it was like this whole part of your body was missing, yet you could still function. And then this is attributed to World War I, and you may have read about or learned about the mustard gas that was used as part of the trench warfare. That evolved into what became chemotherapy. And so they, and this would have been, I guess, in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, they were saying, I wonder if we start to apply these vicious chemicals to try to treat cancer, shrink the tumors, whatever. And so they started to do that on these little kids that had been diagnosed with leukemia in the 1950s. It's heartbreaking. I mean, it really is. It's
Yeah.
awful. But this is how we made progress back in the day and continue to do that. And so many little kids lived like a month longer, but they were horrifically sick from these chemo drugs.
For sure.
And then it evolved. And so to answer your question, I mean, even in the 9 years since I went through treatment, because I didn't know jack about cancer before this. I just didn't. I didn't think I had a need to know. But how now likely I suspect I was overdiagnosed and overtreated just because I didn't fit the mold. And so I've been told, yeah, you probably were a stage 2, but we just didn't know. We didn't want to take any chances because you were right on the tipping point. And so medically now there's a whole nother thought, and I have plenty of friends and acquaintances and I respect that choose to go this very natural path, and they don't, and I respect that. It just wasn't the choice for me because there was no data. I needed data, and I needed to make a decision like today. And that was, so I would have loved to take a year off and go and study this, but you don't often have that luxury. And so I just went with my gut and what we knew. Here's the data, here's the reports. And it was still the right choice for me. I chose to lose my hair. There's cold cap therapy and other ways that you can keep your hair. But again, in 2015, cold cap therapy, where they freeze your scalp, was so new in this country. There was not data, and research had not been done to see whether cancer cells can hang out in your scalp while you're going through chemo, that your cancer might recur. And so I chose to lose my hair. And honestly, that was part of my symbolic rebirth, was to go through that humiliation. And is important because, man, I looked like Demi Moore in G.I. Jane when I shaved my head, because after I had my first chemo, it felt like you ever shampoo your hair and you don't get all the soap out, the shampoo out. Is what it felt like. just felt greasy.
I use a 3-in-1.
There you go. You knock it out at once. But
We can't do that.
All right, which 3-in-1? Which 3-in-1?
If someday they come out with a toothpaste as well,
just knock it all out, and then develop like a car wash system, and you just go on this conveyor belt, and there you go. Gosh, no,
Sorry.
no, that's fine.
just to interject in there, the human body has 600 to 700 lymph nodes.
Woo!
Okay.
I was off by 0.
Yeah, right.
So far
Those
off.
darn zeros.
And for those who want to look that book up, The Emperor of All Maladies. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yep.
What's malady? What is
So
that?
it's like this.
malady.
Yeah, malady is like this problem. This.
Condition.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we're kind of screwed here. This is a problem, huge problem.
Biography of Cancer won the Pulitzer Prize in 2011.
Yep.
So I want to kind of shift. I know we're getting towards the end of the podcast here. I want to talk about humor and going through this.
Certainly.
I had an old business partner when I was in Virginia. He ended up getting cancer, I think of the blood. Shout out Sam. Hope everything's going good for you, my man. But things were like touchy when you were talking to him, right? Like you don't bring up the word tumor doesn't come up very often.
Right.
Chemo doesn't come up. And we were sitting there passing the football back and forth, and he threw it too hard, and like a bubble popped up on the football, and I wasn't thinking, and I was like, God, the football's got a tumor.
Ooh.
And we both kind of looked at each other and started like crying, laughing, because I think he needed that kind of
Right.
release and whatnot. So what was humor for you going through cancer, and how did it help?
Yeah. So what comes to mind first, because there were many moments, I was so naive and I was so obsessed with weight back then. I just look at the whole, I've learned a lot about the human body. And by the way, since I was 50, I got chemically launched into menopause. So I had to go through all that crap on the, I was like, so that was funny. That was fun. But it was, so I was so obsessed with gaining weight, and I was so stupid that I didn't take my anti-nausea medication after my first chemo, which, again, the movies in the 90s where they're just thrown up everywhere, that's what happens. They give you these, and I thought it was a steroid that was going to make me fat. So I started sipping steeped ginger water. It wasn't nearly strong enough. And so I finally took the anti-nausea pill too late, and I didn't think I was going to survive that night, but I did. And I thought, well, the next morning, I thought I'd take a shower. So I did. And then I had blown my nose, and I couldn't make a decision whether to throw the tissue away or to shut the door to the bathroom, because paranoia kicks in, because these drugs, it's impacting your brain, and the paranoia was kicking in. And so I just started laughing, and I said, I can't make a decision. And it's just the stupidest feeling, helpless feeling. And then, like, I would take a walk outside, and the weeds was March, and the weeds were coming in, and it's like they were laughing at me. I was hallucinating, and so, and then you're like, okay, what's worse? And it just is. It's just, I called it a pyramid scheme. Just so they give you these drugs, and then I had to have a day after Neulasta shot because my bone marrow. I can't. It's been a while. Anyway, they give you this $5,000. It costs $5,000 sometimes for this one shot, and so they have to give you that. But then you have to take Tylenol or the anti-allergy medicine, because then that makes you. And so you just keep taking all this medicine. And
What was the shot for? The $5,000 shot?
Yeah, it impacts your because your bone marrow. Something with your bone marrow gets really lowered. Of course, all your white.
From the radiation? or
This
from
is
the-
chemo. This
from
is
the
chemo drugs,
sorry.
yeah. And so your white and red blood counts drop. And so they're worried about, certainly the white fights infection. And so you can't go out in the sun, you can't cut yourself, can't go to the dentist, there's any chance you have of getting an infection, your body is. And both my red and my white blood cell counts dropped, and they're like, oh, you're fine. But people were having infusions, and they were going to go get a plasma or platelet infusion or white, because we have to get all that back up before we can pump you full of chemo drugs. Right. I mean, it really is. It is just shocking. And then the elderly. We were in an open infusion room where I was treated, and then you just can see what's happening in everybody's lives and how they're doing, and some are not doing well at all. Heartbreaking.
Can we discuss COPE for
Yes.
a second? What is COPE? Tell us about it.
So COPE stands for the Center for Oncology Psychology Excellence, and it was a specialty at the University of Denver that I seed funded and founded. It was that life raft that I talked about, my way out of cancer, because I was just so frustrated at the lack of mental health support that's provided as a standard part of cancer treatment. Now, granted, in the 9 years since I went through this, it's really improved a lot. And that whole go to the breast cancer support group, which just wasn't for me. There are some great groups. There's a lot more options to help treat what's happening with you psychologically, which is fantastic. So that's all really improved. But what I found was that it was really kind of a workforce development problem. There wasn't enough training opportunities to train those in the mental health field, whether these are social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, even nurse navigators, those that work with cancer patients. And so this COPE specialty offers training in what's called psycho-oncology. And it's really learning about how this type of trauma, why cancer is different. And one of the reasons is, of course, because there's no cures. I say that with plural because we need cures for every type of cancer out there. And there's hundreds of types of cancer. So there's that. And then is my cancer treatable? And so this specialized training really is specific when it comes to, as I always say, intersecting mental health and cancer. And so COPE provides that training. I've been talking to other educators for years about offering this type of training. And I really should write a book about this because I'm not the expert in this. I'm just the writer. But anyone, if I go and I give a speech or a talk and I talk about this, someone who's been impacted by cancer, whether they've had it themselves or watched a loved one go through it or unfortunately die from it, they're like, no one understands how this stays with you, how a trigger, and even me giving a talk, I've had more people come out to me afterwards just in tears because they're like, either nobody wants to talk about this anymore because my cancer happened 10 years ago, or my aunt just went through it and she just died and everybody's just acting like it's okay and I'm traumatized and I don't know what to do. So anyway, it's just bringing attention. So I call myself an advocate.
Yeah.
Still.
Is it, it's teaching, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's teaching these healthcare professionals how to discuss certain types of issues to develop a healthier mindset for people going through cancer, to stay positive and optimistic.
That's
and is that a big thing too? I mean, that's for healing anything.
Yeah.
Your mindset is so important.
Oh, gosh.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. The body's ability to heal itself has a whole lot to do with the sort of the state of your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and again, I'm not the expert on this, but in the case of COPE, these are clinical psychologists going to get their PsyD degree, and in some are at the master's level, but just specific training about the brain, how cancer uniquely impacts the brain, how you, as a future licensed psychologist, will interact with other medical providers and understand what they do, and how physical therapy impacts, what they need to know about the mental health, what you go through. And again, cancer today impacts eventually 1 in every 3 women and 1 in every 2 men with some type of cancer. Yep. And there's a lot of it. Now some of those are considered very treatable, and prostate cancer, some say you're likely going to die of natural causes before you die. But there's some, if you have things like the BRCA gene and such, I mean, it's just all over the place. You can't put us all into this convenient box. It's just so complex. And so one other quick comment, I chose to have genetic testing done for cancer genes. And that was the day after I was diagnosed, I had that blood drawn for that. And it turned out I have no cancer genes. And so that really impacted that data, because I've worked around engineers my whole life, driven by data. And so that really impacted my decisions on my treatment, because cancer statistically was less likely to recur because I don't have the cancer genes. Now, when you find out that you do have the cancer genes, that can impact how you move forward in this. So it's about so much more than just losing your hair. And that's kind of the point. Right.
Bethany, can you quiet down over there?
Yeah, I
You've
know.
been so
She's
talkative today.
I think I've she's in shock.
I'm taking it all.
Who is this
Taking
crazy
it all
lady?
in. No, I love it. I love all of
Do you have anything you want?
Yeah, I did have a question. You mentioned just kind of falling into some depression in the process and everything you went through.
Yeah.
What was your biggest lifeline in the moment, in the day-to-day? And like, how did you handle all that?
Yeah. It was because I get this, such a perfectionist and so driven. I was going to get good at cancer, and that's what kept me going. And I felt so lousy all the time, and I was so paranoid. I was my own worst enemy. I was trying to put up a good front, but something good needed to come from this. And by golly, I was going to be figuring out what that was. And that's really what COPE was. And what I continue to do now, which is talk openly about any aspect of this. And I have friends that I am never to mention the word cancer around them ever. It's just, and so you talked about like, okay, what are the boundaries here? And some are really, I guess, relieved to talk about it, and others aren't. But no, that was my lifeline, was just like, what's the purpose? Why, not just why did this happen to me, but what is supposed to come of this? What's the outcome? And I honestly view now horrible things that happen to me and to others, I immediately go and I look for, okay, what's the opportunity? What's to be the lesson learned? Give it to me straight. How much time do I have? And I am just like straight to the point. And it's just my nature now, because life is such a precious thing. And that is my takeaway. Make every day count. As corny as that sounds, it's so true. So true.
It's such it's a blessing, and you say it in your book, The Unlikely Gift.
Yeah,
and that's
crazy,
really,
huh? Yeah.
That's the theme. Trip, do you have any?
Just where we can find these amazing books.
Thank you.
This is your time. Plug whatever you like to plug. Website, LinkedIn, all the good stuff.
Yeah. I so appreciate that. So I am an independent author. I'm proud of it. Just because I need to have control. And
I didn't say it.
shocked, no.
At least you know yourself.
I've been stalked by traditional publishers, and those conversations are, come and, give us all your contacts. And then we'll take 80%. You'll get 20, and you'll do all the work. It's like, no.
Thanks.
Hard
Anyway,
pass.
yeah, I know. Thank you. But you can get them. You can find them both on Amazon. However, just because I've not sort of done the Amazon game, you'll get it quicker if you order off my website, which is DianeMSimard.com. I'm guessing this will be in the show notes and everything too.
We'll backlink everything in the bio, so if you
Thank
guys
you.
are interested, you should click right to it.
Yep. And I do a monthly newsletter and blog, and the newsletter is just full of whatever's happening in my life right then. In addition to being a writer, author, and an advocate, I also work with C-level executives now. I left corporate America 2 years ago. Excuse me, coming up on 2 years ago. And I now help other leaders create, develop, and execute on their life legacy. And because I've seen so many CEOs in particular that have great, thriving businesses. They want to sell, their families want them to sell, but they're scared to death because they don't have a life plan, right? Because they're so busy running their companies. And so helping with that and helping to position them and their businesses for that and what's the next chapter in their life. So.
Well, that's super cool. Why did you just bring that up now?
I know.
Never back on, I guess.
I know. I guess that's another topic. Sorry. I
was like, that sounds interesting. I have more questions on that.
No, absolutely. There is a, and it's so cool to do this work. And I've found, since I've been doing it, that many of them like having someone to talk to. I've been through selling a company, a successful business, the cancer experience, and I've got a book in the works. I've started on it, and I'll probably have to wait a couple of years before it comes out. But just all the funny things that have happened in my life, and all the corporate dysfunction, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's just because I have such a different lens now. I am so grateful to be alive. I was thrown a lifeline and given a second chance to do a better job of living, and by golly, I am going to honor that. And that's nothing even like godly or religious. It's just I just look at everything differently, and what a blessing that is.
Yeah. Amen. Bethany? Last thoughts? Anything?
I love it. I love all
Love
of
it.
it.
All right, cool. Hey, thank you so much again for taking your time. This is fantastic. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. We'll probably see you on Thursday for the next one. Take care. Have a great day. See ya.